what's up everyone? Welcome to a new episode of It's Lit, It's Dark. As you can see, it's a little bit different today. Well, let's get started. This is going to be Chivalry, the short story for Neil Gaiman. As always, we are going to explain a little bit of what we will be discussing in class and what we'll be analyzing in class as well. First thing that I want you to do is to imagine that a person from the Middle Ages traveled through time to meet you. Oh, what would you ask this person? What do you think this person would want to ask you? All right, and well, let's make a list of questions that you would ask a time travel. All right, so after we do that in class, let's do the next thing, and it's think about and answer the essential question. What is true chivalry? Right? We already know that chivalry is an honor code. Right? An honor code serving during the Middle Ages with all of this culture around kings and knights pledging allegiance to the crown, all of the behavior cultural around it. So maybe we can take some time to find what chivalry is, do a quick search in Google, and then we can discuss that for a little bit. For now, we got to continue with the video, and with the quick start, let's see. We're going to imagine, again, that a person from the Middle Ages traveled through time to meet us. What would we ask? What are those questions that we wrote few minutes ago? What do you think this person will ask us as a time traveler? As a time traveler. So again, let's think about that and share what questions might this person have for us, and what questions, of course, can we ask them. Right? Once we're done with that, let's continue. So the first point that we're going to be analyzing today is characterization. Right? The first thing to take into consideration are the elements of the genre, right? We know this is a short story, and that short stories include the basic elements of fiction, which are settings, characters, plot, conflicts, and theme. All right? All of these elements combine together to convey the theme. All right? There's the subject matter of the story. We need a setting, characters to interact in the setting, and of course a plot so the characters can perform, act, live, if you may, and of course a conflict that they need to solve. The second element or another element of short stories as a genre is that it centers on a particular moment or event, or that it follows the life of one character. Okay, so we're following the life of the main character throughout all of his or her adventures, in order to develop, of course, the elements that we described before. It's also another characteristic of short stories is that it can be read in one sitting. You don't need to take some days or a lot of time to read it and then stop because you get tired. No. Normally, a short story is a very short thing that you can just sit down for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, even less, and read it and be finished with it. Finally, it can also include elements of fantasy. Not all short stories are fantasies, but probably most fantasies are short stories. All right? So the idea is to show supernatural events that, you know, in the end, they communicate the theme and the message of the story. Through characterization, we will analyze that a writer's method for revealing characters' personalities. All right, so that is what we call characterization, to reveal the characteristics or personalities of the characters, how a character is developed. And this is the way that writers use for basic, for characterization, writers use 4 basic methods. Okay, the first one is describing, of course, their physical appearance, how they look. Okay, so the writer will describe height, skin tone, if the face is always serious or happy, if the color of the hair, what type of clothes they wear, right? So the physical appearance in order to create a mental image all right, of the character in the reader. The second method is presenting the character's actions, thoughts, and speech. Okay, when we see dialogue in a story, that's what we call direct speech. All right, we are actually reading what the person or what the character says. Their actions, we can analyze what they do, if they decide to do this, if they decide to go to a place, to not go to a place. Decision making in characters, that's also how a writer develops the character. Okay, that's how a writer develops the personality, right? The thoughts of a character. When we see a character, or when we read a character that's thinking about, and we can literally read their thoughts, that's also a method to present the characterization of the character, if I may. The third method will be revealing other characters' reactions to a specific character. How the other or secondary characters react to this specific character that may or may not be the main character, okay? May or may not be the protagonist, but as the writer wants to describe and let you know the traits of a character, he or she can also do it by making other characters around, let's say the protagonist, react to what they do, right? And finally, a writer can just directly comment on a character, and the narrator can just give their opinions or show what they think about the attitude that they have about a certain character. So these are basically the 4 different methods that writers use to develop a character, and that will help us to analyze characterization. Now, it is related to other elements of fiction, right? Characterization is related to other elements of fiction. For example, a writer may place a character in a setting where he or she stands out in some way, which could affect how others view the character. And we have to take that into consideration, because as we read chivalry, we are going to notice what methods Neil Gaiman uses to develop the 2 main characters. Okay, we're going to pay close attention to those 2 main characters, and we're going to see, in the light of the 4 methods that I just described, how the writer and the author develops these 2 characters. In addition, we also have to pay attention to how the story setting influences our perception of the characters, because of course, depending on where and when they act, they may react in different ways, and of course the setting will interact with the characters and vice versa. We're also going to analyze fantasy as an element of these type of stories. Okay, we already know that fantasy is a type of fiction that intentionally portrays unrealistic events, settings, or characters. For example, a story may be set in a non-existent world, or the characters might have supernatural powers that we would never see in real life. Although fantasies are often written mainly for entertainment, they can express serious themes about life or society. For example, chivalry mixes elements of the Arthurian legends into the story of an elderly woman living in a dull English town, right? So there's always a message behind that. Yes, fantasies will be normally presented as a way of entertainment. Think about, for example, the series of Harry Potter or The Lord of the Rings, Narnia. Those are examples of fantasy, but if you think about it, and if you think it through, you're going to see that behind those stories, there is always a theme and a message to be communicated. We're going to use a chart like this to note down realistic and fantasy details in the story. I got a couple of examples here that I'm going to read. For example, an example of realistic details would be that Mrs. Whittaker stops in at a secondhand shop every week on her way home from the post office. That's a completely realistic idea. That is it's totally realistic that a person will have these type of, let's say, habits of stopping by every other shop or a certain shop as a weekly activity as part of their routine. Now, a fantasy detail, an example would be that she finds the Holy Grail for sale in the shop. We don't think a person would ever find something as important historically and fantastically as the Holy Grail, all right? Or just seeing a dragon passing by, crossing the sky. So those are the type of details that we're also going to be recording in a chart very similar to this that we're going to do during classwork, okay? And as we read chivalry, we have to keep an eye out for other elements of fantasy and think about how these elements help move the plot forward. Why? Because the idea with a fantasy element is to call out the attention of the reader. And when you get, as a writer, when you get the attention, you want the reader to finish your book. You want the reader to finish your story. So that's why every now and then, here or there, the writers will use this type of technique of creating an impression on the reader through fantasy to keep them engaged in the reading. As it is, we're also going to analyze language conventions, and this time we're going to focus on appositive and appositive phrases. What are those? In this lesson, as you see, you will learn to identify and use appositive and appositive phrases. Let's call them just appositives. An appositive is a noun or a pronoun that identifies or renames another noun or pronoun right beside it. Because of different because of different reasons. One of them is to create emphasis, to make the reader pay attention and call out that there's something important here. There's extra information that I want to use to also make a reference to this specific subject matter. And the second thing is also to to make the reading more entertaining, more interesting, and also avoid redundancy. All right. An appositive phrase includes an appositive and its modifiers. All right. So yes, an appositive, as it is, can be just one word, that is a noun or a pronoun that identifies another noun or pronoun right beside it, and that's the clue, right beside it. And when we are talking about an appositive phrase, it includes, of course, that noun, that's the appositive, and the rest of its modifiers. Here's an example of an appositive phrase that renames Arthur. As it says, it was signed by Arthur, King of all Britons. So Arthur is the subject matter that we're talking about. And then we get an appositive that's king. The word king, the noun king, is an appositive to Arthur. All right? That's a proper noun. And of all Britons, king of all Britons. King is the appositive, and of all Britons is just the rest of modifiers that accompany the word king to make it a phrase, to make it a complete phrase. All right, to make it a complete noun phrase, which ends up being an appositive phrase. We're going to see a lot more details, and we're going to see a lot more examples of these when we do classworks. So make sure you don't miss it. And as you read chivalry, look out for appositive and appositive phrases. All right, just to sum up, we're going to study these following weeks, and with chivalry, we're going to study number 1, characterization, number 2, fantasy, and of course, language conventions as it is. My friends, for now, I just give you a big thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. I'll see you very, very, very soon. Take care.